How are things down the other end? This is like living in Pittsburgh, if you can call that living.
Yeah, so a couple of people have made that observation that it's like working in a foreign country, working in Pittsburgh.
It gives a lot of freedom.
And well, yeah, in addition to freedom, it gives you a different perspective. You're not so much a victim of trends, of popular thinking, of, what's in the state-of-the-art head right now.
This is a scene from Night of the Living Dead, a low-budget film co-authored, directed, photographed, and edited by George Romero in 1968. Already the head of a successful commercial production house in Pittsburgh, this was his first venture into feature filmmaking. Its flaws were mainly budgetary, while its virtues were clearly visionary, earning it popular success as a horror film and a cult following for exploratory uses of genre and technique. Style is difficult to define, but even in this disembodied clip, the technical aspects of Romero's style are making themselves apparent. They're in his cutting, his camera angles, in his two-dimensional design within the film frame. Great spatial movements from shot to shot, and even within shot. Just making films in Pittsburgh for 10 years has become a sort of stylistic statement. In January of '78, Romero and his producer, Richard Rubinstein, allowed a film crew from the School of Visual Arts onto the set of their latest production, the second part of the Dead trilogy, Dawn of the Dead. Using footage shot over one long weekend, a documentary took shape, focusing first on the filmmaking process and secondly on directorial vision. What part of it reaches the screen unhampered? What external forces affect it? But first, let's introduce our cast. In pre-production, George Romero, screenwriter. Richard Rubinstein, producer. In production, George Romero, directing. Richard Rubinstein, producing. Michael Gornick, cinematographer. Carl Augenstein, lighting director. Tom Savini, creator of special makeup, actor and stuntman. Ken Foray, actor. Scott Reiniger, actor. David Emge, actor. John Amplis, actor in Martin and casting director of Dawn. And in post-production, editing the film. Pre-production involves writing the screenplay, raising the money, and organizing the shoot.
All aboard. Morning. Hi. 10 hours to Pittsburgh. Is it Barker on your left? Adam traveling alone?
All alone.
Shall I wake you for Pittsburgh?
No, I'm going to New York.
The Big Apple.
Right.
Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Good night.
These are the opening moments of Martin, a film Romero made just before dawn. As the story unfolds, you'll see the screenplay qualities, all inherently cinematic, which begin to articulate his style. First, the visual imperative. With few exceptions, cinema relies as little as possible on the spoken word. Characterization and plot are best revealed through action and accumulation of detail. Montage concepts begin in the screenplay. The story is developing with literally no dialogue, and suspense is being generated not only in the horror of the situation, but in the mystery of the plot itself. We still don't know his identity, his motives, or his goal. Romero's use of dual linear movement fleshes out the two dimensions of film into three. A use of such devices as the manipulation of time, or other devices such as irony. As you can see from the final page of the Dawn screenplay, Romero's use of the form is unorthodox, in a medium where one page generally equals 1 minute of film.
The script seems long. Did you plan to shoot it all? I mean, giving yourself leeway in the cutting?
Pretty much, yeah. I usually write long scripts. Martin was a long script that was really a long script. I mean, and the first cut came out at almost 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Wow.
This is a long script that seems long. It's not really long. There's so much description, and if you read those pages, there's so much action described in great paragraphs where I got carried away, you know, describing the action itself. And some of those things take a second and a half, you know. And it's not cutting that long. I cut the first half of the film, and it came in at 45 minutes. So I think the first cut will probably be about a 2-hour cut, which is not bad for a first cut.
To what extent do other influences creep into a work, and at what stage?
A lot of people have often compared you to Hitchcock, but you don't buy that. How come?
They have some nerve. No, I don't. Well, filmmaking is funny. Filmmakers, all artists, I guess, to some extent, are parasitic of what they've seen and what they are basically imitating, what attracted them in the first place. Filmmakers, maybe more than any other form, I mean, it's not like you can sit down with a pencil and do your thing, or a canvas, or whatever. It's very expensive, and very few people get enough chance to work with the hardware and get enough chance to really develop a style or except on a very intellectual level. That's why, unfortunately, the state of the art has somewhat gone towards menus and pre-planning and everything else, which is a little bit destructive. I would say that if I'm parasitic of anybody, it's more Wells and some of the early, like Howard Hawks and people like that. Those are the films that really affected me. There are certain Hitchcockian things that are, first of all, I don't consciously, when I'm setting up a shot, say, wow, remember that shot? And then try to imitate that. There are Hitchcock-type influences. I think the sequence in the cemetery in Night of the Living Dead your way in the background and you don't really know what it is, and then it gradually gets worked into the plot. It starts to become a threat, and then the threat is a real threat. That's kind of a Hitchcockian sequence. Hey, I mean, praying's for church, huh? Come on.
I haven't seen you in church lately.
Well, there's not much sense in my going to church. Do you remember one time when we were small, we were out here? It was from right over there. I jumped out at you from behind the tree, and Grandpa got all excited, and he shook his fist at me, and he said, "Boys, you'll be damned to hell." Remember that? Right over there. Well, you used to really be scared here.
Johnny,
You're still afraid.
stop it now. I mean it.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Stop it. You're ignorant.
They're coming for you, Barbara.
Stop it. You're acting like a child.
They're coming for you. Look, there comes one of them now.
He'll hear you.
Here he comes now. I'm getting out of it.
Johnny.
A couple of pieces that I've seen written about Night of the Living Dead say that it takes us back to silent cinema storytelling.
Oh! No!
I can see now a couple of specific things in a couple of my films that are Hitchcockian in that way. Sometimes people say it because of the plot lines being, there are certain ironies in the plots that I use. I don't think that has anything to do with form. I think that's more a content association that people are making. The Thing was the movie that knocked me down when I was a kid. That's the one, I think, horror film, everyone says, what attracts you to the genre, and it was probably The Thing. I was the right age at exactly the right time, and it had exactly the right effect on me. I never forgot it.
The scenographics of The Thing and those of Night and Dawn are remarkably similar. Confined spaces within which groups of protagonists are eternally on guard against a deadly foe. Tranquility never exists in Romero's world. Casting occurs in pre-production. Is it an irony in both Night and Dawn that Romero's main protagonists are black?
In Night of the Living Dead, the character, if you read the script, if you read my shooting script, the character is never described in terms of his color. And Dwayne was the best actor that we knew from among our friends, which is where we cast that film, the way we cast that film. And so he did the part. Now, consciously, I resisted writing new dialogue because he happened to be black, and just let it play when we just shot the script. As we started to shoot and got into it, you know, we lived at that farmhouse, and so we were always into raps about the, you know, implications and the meaning and stuff like that. So some of that maybe crept into the film. But I think in both Night and Dawn, the biggest job that all of us had during the production of both of those films was subduing all of those thoughts, because those things can really interfere with what you're doing. And what you're doing on the surface is making a comic book. So those ironies that you're talking about are, I think, that selection process is something, again, that happened at script stage, or on a consciousness level somewhere beneath the craft of making the film.
The producer is in a key position during pre-production, securing funds, putting the film into a viable financial and legal position, and thereafter protecting the director.
I think that we tend to operate in more European style in terms of the way we produce and the way George directs, and that we tend to follow Sarris's auteur theory of direction, and that I see my function as a producer in terms of providing George Romero with a brush, palette, and canvas. And his creative control is absolute in terms of the film itself, that he's the script writer, that he's the director, and that he's the editor. And it's totally the product of one man's vision on a creative level.
The biggest difference really, well, in Dawn is working with a little bit of money and still being satisfied with the product. In fact, it was easier. I mean, I was paranoid about it up front because just having that extra weight is a trip. But I'm comfortable with what Dawn of the Dead is, and the extra money that it took to make it what it is was really not a hindrance at all. It was a big, big help. You know, a lot of people say, I can't work with money, I can't work with a lot of people around.
this film was financed in somewhat of a traditional way, in that it's co-financed internationally, that a group headed by Dario Argento in Italy co-financed the film with us. And our end of the co-financing comes from private individuals. But I think it was unique in that this project started off with two creative people getting together, Dario Argento and George Romero, and then the business side came after that point.
Now the physical production begins. In this second stage, the director and cinematographer stand to share equally in importance for what is captured on film. It's the 8th week of the Dawn shoot. We're in an $80 million mall in Pittsburgh, which Romero is allowed to use each night from 11 till 7 in the morning.
Everyone ready? Camera. Roll it. Sound. Roll it.
He does not get uptight. He asks me if it's possible and asks me how much time it's going to take. And then he'll give me a straight yes or no on whether to do it. There's no bullshit, there's no yelling. It's been a very, for a shoot this long under these conditions, I'd say it's been absolutely wonderful.
George Romero directs pretty much the way he is. Pleasant, relaxed, great sense of humor.
The best thing about him is that he gets across what he wants without telling you. I don't know how he does it, but it's incredible. Because he's so clear about what he wants all the time. And I mean, I think, like when he's working, he's like editing it at the same time.
That when he says it looks good, I mean, we've learned that indeed it will look good because he has a very good eye.
The atmosphere which pervaded the Dawn shoot was unusual for a film production in this country. And while good films have been created by directors who were universally despised, there's no doubt that chemistry counts.
I think George likes confidence, of course, in his crew, but I think mainly he likes to work with people he feels at ease with. That they have to be competent, but beyond that, he likes people he can work with till 7 o'clock in the morning, like we did today, and feel at ease with them. You know, there's a lot of rapping that goes on constantly on the shoots. A lot of fun, you know. Yeah. A lot of hard work. It's a joy working with George because he accepts a lot of input in terms of what I see, or, you know, it's amazing. There's even suggestions that come oftentimes from crew members, you know, through me, and he's very willing to accept those observations. And, you know, a lot of his film is input from the crew. There's a lot of freedom. It's a real democracy with George.
The Dawn production took a month off in December rather than remove and restore the holiday decorations every night, losing hours of shooting time. Romero used that month to cut what he had already shot. By the time the school crew arrived, 4 weeks into the second round of shooting, he had covered the screenplay well enough to stop at any point and edit the footage into release form. It was now in an improvisational stage where new ideas were being developed.
This picture is really designed for right now. It's much more of a comic book. It's much lighter.
It didn't seem so in the script. In fact, the scene we saw being shot yesterday at the pie fight was,
didn't appear in the script.
No, and I've heard rumors that the ending has been also changed.
Yeah. In fact, we shot both because I wasn't willing to give up the tragic ending. But this film, Dawn of the Dead, has a very, it's a very romanticized film.
The major change that's happened that I can see from my conceptions of upon first reading it and now is that it's lightening up.
Well, I think the special effects are a substantial portion of the budget, where prior to this they were less so in George's other films. It's a number of explosions, a number of cosmetic effects that Tom Savini does. All of those things take a certain amount of time and a certain amount of budgetary support in order to get them to work. They don't always work the first time.
Okay, a squib is simply a detonator. But we placed a detonator in a tube that was filled with gunpowder. and that was placed inside a prophylactic, which was filled with blood. So when the blast went off, the concussion blew the prophylactic and the blood from beneath the clothing. We're in this mall when the mall closes. The mall closes, 9:30 or so. We start coming in around 8 o'clock to get set up and everything. So we only have like until 7 in the morning before we have to stop shooting because we got to get all our stuff out and the mall opens. So there'll be times like in a particular night where we're shooting all over the script. So it has to be done fast because that all has to be done in like 7 hours, you know? George is a wonderful guy. You can say to George, like, he'll sit there, be very cool, no expression on his face. You can say to him, George, I got this fabulous idea. Why don't we take a screwdriver? Let's say a maintenance man has a screwdriver on his belt and have a maintenance man zombie attack Scott. Scott pulls a screwdriver out of his bag and sticks it in the zombie's ear and shoves it into the brain, you know? George will go, okay. Yeah. You know? You could say, George, how about if we get dragons coming out of the fountains in the mall? I'm sure he'd go, yeah, okay. Yeah. You can't shake him. The first half of the shooting was very organized, and there wasn't a great deal of improvisation because most of the big effects were done in the first part of the shoot. The things that George wrote in the script, you know, we planned ahead, we knew exactly, we would stand around the office and he would walk the whole thing through and be a zombie, be the victim, be the helicopter, you know. Very organized. This shoot's a little different. We've created characters on our own, you know, like I've created a character, and a friend of mine, another stuntman's created a character, and he's been developing those characters within the, like as we shoot, day by day. So it's like really loose, this half of the shoot, and just as much fun.
How many zombies are you making up tonight?
It depends. It depends on what we're doing in the script. You know, some nights we'll have 200, sometimes we'll have 5. You know, nights we have 5. You know, they're the concentrated scenes between like one lead, and put 5 around them, so it looks like, you know, a continuation of the 200 the day before. You know. It depends. Like I say, it depends on the what's on the script for that night.
Can you explain a little about what you're doing right now?
Okay, these are foam latex appliances sticking on his face. The zombies are people that have died in interesting ways, or not interesting ways, just people who have died and come back to life. A lot of them look like car accident victims, cancer patients, you know. The one guy came in here in a suit, a 3-piece suit, beautiful 3-piece suit, so I made him up like a mortician would at a funeral parlor, and he was like beautiful, you know, overly made up, you know, with lipstick and all that. So he was walking around like a fresh one, you know. Okay, you have to lean forward just a bit so I can powder all this. You'll probably get a little of your shirt here. Others are like people who have been bitten by other zombies and who have died and become zombies, and they're the ones that are the grossest. I don't know what happened to you. Car accident, zombie bit your face off or something like that. See, the fun of this thing is inventing all this stuff.
You only want clothesline?
Okay, close your eyes. And I'm covering them with stuff called rubber mask grease paint. It's a grease paint that has more, well, castor oil in it. Keeps the rubber piece from drying out and changing color after the makeup has been on it for a while. You sculpt them in clay, you make a mold of them, then you pour foam latex in the mold, you bake it in an oven. I took a big photo tray and sculpted a zillion wounds, cast them, you know, I had those. And I did another one, cast them, and I had those wounds. So every now and then when I'm making a piece, and I have foam latex left over, I'll pour it in one of these slabs, you know, and I'll have some extra wounds laying around.
Are there any schools that teach that?
No, not that I know of. I had to teach myself.
A director must be a psychologist. He must also be a storyboarder, an editor, linking the disparate sensibilities of cast and crew with his own vision.
Okay. If it's straight up, we can do it with hands, yeah.
Tom Savini, now on the other side of the camera, is about to essay a difficult stunt which will portray his demise on screen. One can see, under these specialized circumstances, Romero effortlessly fulfilling his ongoing roles as prime mover of the production.
Keep going, keep going, keep going.
Ready, Tom?
He wants to move off.
Keep going.
I mean,
Okay, okay, good.
Anytime, Tom.
All set?
Anytime.
Is he rolling?
Stand by.
you got to go right there, Tom?
Yeah, from here.
Ready, Mike?
Joe?
Joe Shelby's hand around and watch? Holding the bench on the left. Oh, no, I can't see the bench. Okay. Quiet, please. Okay, Mike? Out of sight. Beautiful. Okay.
What about the approach you're taking in directing it? I had thought that Night of the Living Dead was pretty tightly storyboarded. Is that true?
It was and it wasn't. A lot of the sequences were, as a lot of the sequences in this film are.
Oh. Because while we've been here, it seems very loose.
It's been loose, but, well, you've been here only for a few scenes, too.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the scenes, as you watch the interlock, I think, you'll find to be very, very close to the way that script is written.
Storyboarding refers most commonly to a series of artist renderings prepared in pre-production. In production, each shot will correspond to one of these sketches.
George is a genius in that respect. He can memorize his own storyboards, and he prepares them himself. And Chris's AD has helped in that respect, too, but he doesn't literally storyboard his shots, you know. He's a very complex director. You know, he likes to keep it to himself in terms of the actual storyboarding of blocking scenes, and he brings it with him to the set, you know. That's his style.
There are certain things that I want to happen that build on each other. In this film, the people starting to get tempted and attracted by the mall and starting to get, or adopting their military approach to taking it over.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the things that I try to keep as close as possible to the script. The sequence with when they go and get the trucks and block off the outside of the mall, because there's a certain build that was written into the script, which I really think adds to the overall flow of the suspense of the film.
Here in a later scene from Martin, Romero's modern vampire story, one can feel a tight, pre-structured quality indicative of storyboarding.
I had a copy of the script about a month and a half or two before we started shooting, and he already had it storyboarded to an extent.
There's a lot of quick cuts. You're creeping down hallways, and how would you hit your mark emotionally?
I generally didn't worry too much about it emotionally. I was more interested in hitting the mark and being in the right place.
Who are you?
Well,
Oh, my God. Oh.
let's not get excited about this now. That's no reason to get upset about anything, okay?
I don't know him!
Were the scenes very tightly blocked off?
They weren't tightly blocked, but they were blocked because of it being such an action scene. You know, we had written blocking just as if we would work in a theater. Of course, Martin was a small shoot. Generally not more than 8 people on the set in total.
Dawn had, I think, 35 in staff and hundreds in actors.
Yeah, many nights, hundreds. His attention was being pulled away all too often, so he kept himself pretty much by himself during that. But his overall attitude with actors was pretty much the same.
Now, your role in Dawn was on the other side of the camera.
I was casting director. Mostly my job was recruiting zombies.
Creative compromise is the name of the game in filmmaking. Logistics of production force one to make decisions counter to the original concept, but ultimately beneficial.
Well, we were talking before about the fact that when he got to the mall, it had a different atmosphere than he already thought about Dawn having. The mall also brought a futuristic look to the film. It was so vast.
the idea of the mall itself, the moment we see it, the moment we come in and see what it is, I think it's going to become obvious in terms of what we're saying about the false security of, you know, consumer society.
It's a great metaphor. It works. It's a great set too. Great location.
It's a great location.
Really.
We couldn't do it without a mall like this, and we were really lucky to get it.
How has it been working with it? Have there been some
Great.
problems?
There have been a few problems.
Mainly
but
technical?
Mainly technical. No real people problems at all.
When I read it, I could easily picture the editing. I mean, your style, you know, leading the angles.
Right.
But I didn't picture the color designs or what the mall would really look like.
All of those influences everyone's attitude towards the thing, as well as my own desire, I think, to lighten things up and go more action, adventure.
First of all, you're dealing, as I said, with 300-400 extras in some scenes. You're dealing with a shopping mall as our primary set, where their primary business is, in fact, selling consumer goods, and integrating what we want to do with the life of the mall has been an arduous and complicated task. There is no way to pay, or let's say that there is, but it's way beyond our capacity to pay in dollar values what the use of the mall is worth. The people that own the shopping mall have been aesthetically attached to filmmaking, and they are getting enough money so that it doesn't cost them anything to have us in here, which is an expensive proposition in itself. But if they, in terms of looking at it, are they making a profit on our being involved with them? No, that's not the case.
What about insurance?
Insurance is a very costly item, and particularly where you're dealing in public places. If a little old lady tends to see a zombie, or happens to see a zombie wandering around with makeup and has a heart attack, that's a potential problem. I don't want to limit that to little old ladies, but anyone. So yes, the insurance tab on this particular picture is a substantial number.
All right? Okay. All right. All right, Stevie. All right. Great, Stevie.
Obviously, you can't light a place this size without spending a week to light it. We discussed doing the whole thing in one shot, and rehearse it for 30 days and shoot it one day. But so we have to keep it pretty low, otherwise there would be really dead areas.
The situation is not enough time, not enough lights, and incredibly large spaces to deal with. And I think the large spaces and the fact that we're shooting a large number of angles on any given shot are the biggest problem. We'll do a setup, an initial setup, and shoot one angle, and the director will immediately call for a reversal on it. Now, normally that's not too big a problem, but in this case, one reversal might encompass 200 or 300 feet of mall area, where you have background just to fill in, just to create touches, to avoid black holes. Hot spots, there's glass everywhere, creating reflections. My first reaction was total panic. I aggravated myself to death because I wanted it to be better. The initial shots were so big that I had to use every light to its absolute fullest amount. I couldn't skip a couple of, sections and say, oh, I'll fill them in with another light. I mean, I had to know that between every 10 feet there had to be something, or every certain area there had to be a highlight or a spot. I had to know that, and I had to know exactly what it was. And I went back to my books, and I read performance figures on every lamp that I have, and measured things, and went through it over and over again. And finally, it came out. We got the initial setup done, and it worked. And I felt like about 5 million pounds was taken off my head.
Well, we're swinging with it on the very, very, very big shots. Right here, right now, we're using a lot of tungsten. We're pushing one stop, and we're working with ease under that situation. For the very, very big shots, we're pushing one again and using some Zeiss Pistagon lenses, and with a 1.4, which gives us plenty of light to shoot on.
So the whole basis of this
pushing one again and using some Zeiss Pistagon lenses, and with a 1.4, which gives us plenty of light to shoot on.
Ready, Mike? Quiet. Sound? Rolling.
6:59, take 7, sound 13:43.
I've never worked with any other director in terms of a feature, but, you know, I know the reaction to George's style, how he gets so many setups in 1 hour. The other directors might spend 3 or 4 hours on a shot, whereas George, you know, I don't think he could ever do that. Yeah, we've discussed angles and style on a previous film we did called Martin. We pretty much maintain that mode when we shoot horror stuff, which is a lot of wide angle, low positions, to accentuate, you know, the monster aspects, the zombies or whatever. That's pretty much it in terms of any adapted style, which we have, you know, intensified in this film or any previous horror films which we've done. This film allows us to be a little more graceful and a little more beautiful with our photography, because it's not simply a horror film. In fact, one of our worries was that we were getting a little too far away from the horror genre. But I can help it along. I understand where he's going. I've worked with him enough now that I understand his direction.
George tends to set up scenes and then let them happen, rather than being extremely, extremely precise about every movement of every actor and the delivery of every line. If he's not happy with the way it comes out the first time, he will do another take, obviously. But I think overall, style-wise, I think that it's consistent. I think that it's a little bit more traditional in that he is using how can I say, a more standard approach in terms of reverses and 2 shots on dialogue and the like. Not a lot, but somewhat.
Well, we shoot anywhere from 15 to 20 to 1.
Senores, please to let me pass.
I cover conversations with the master.
No, no, please. Just let me pass. I go up to 7th floor to find my sister.
And then with single headshots on everybody involved.
People of 107 will do what you wish now. These are simple people. They have little, but they do not give it up easily. And they're dead. They give up to no one.
Not so much cutaways. In other words, I'll cut to all of the people, or I'll use people as their own cutaways.
Many have died last week on these streets. In the basement of this building, we find them. I have given them the last rites. Now, you do what you will. You are stronger than us, but soon, I think, they be stronger than you.
And sometimes if I see a shot I like, I'll just go do it, almost on whim.
Let the dead walk, senores. We must stop the killing, or we lose the war.
Out here, shooting, I don't really think too much about the cutting. I'd rather let that happen, too. Except in tightly choreographed sequences like the truck scene and so forth, where I know what's cutting to what.
In this action scene, notice how he has isolated the 3 leads to better manipulate the visuals.
Right.
Close-ups, medium shots, long shots.
One look, man.
Visceral, disorienting angles, rhythm and tension potentials to be inherited by himself on the editing table. The most celebrated shot in Night is this one. A close-up of one zombie gives way to an extreme long shot of several of them, and the film transforms into a vision of doom. A revelation in space multiplies the horror far beyond our expectations. As a spatial stylist, Romero is consistent. He's a master of spatial design.
Yeah, I never really put it down to the use of space, except that's what it is. It has to do with again, it's just breaking from tradition. I mean, there are ways that you're supposed to shoot that, involving screen direction and involving, you know, a formal patternized kind of cutting, which I just don't like. I think if the scene is a tension-filled scene, or if it's a suspenseful scene, or a very active scene, which is meant to grate, everything should grate. How much you work with film, it never ceases to amaze me how different it is once it's up there and you're watching all your footage. It's very hard to translate when you're on the set. You can't imagine what it's going to look like in 2 dimensions, up there that big with electronic amplification. But I don't think it's insecurity to say that, well, I'm not sure how this is going to work out, so I'm going to shoot it another way. I mean, that's just exploration. There's a lot of film is like watercolor. There's a lot of accidents, and it's learning how to control the accidents, and that's where you just need to keep doing a lot of work.
The key creative force in post-production is the editor, who, in this case, also happens to be the director.
There are a few scenes, like we do a housing project scene where we raid this housing project in the beginning, and there's this, there are a couple of families in the apartments there that we come in and we're throwing them out of the housing project, and various people are killed, and the way some of them are killed just make you go like that, you know. And I saw some of the stuff being shot, but the scenes, but when he put it together, it was, I was riveted to the scene. I couldn't believe it, you know. Yeah, it was pretty powerful. Definitely not boring.
It has been said that Romero doesn't allow us to look at his shots. Rather, his cutting forces us to experience them. This is as true of night as it is of Martin. As it is of dawn. Considering that quick cutting will wear an audience down emotionally, it is remarkable that he can maintain such a level of tension in his films. They contain almost twice as many cuts as any other directors.
He conceptualizes during takes exactly what he needs, and he's very, very efficient with his shots. Some call it choppy, or, you know, some call it heavy-handed in terms of the editorial style.
George's commercial background, if you will, has set the tone for his cutting. That he has a commercial reel that I think is slick as anybody out of New York or Los Angeles, Mellon Bank and U.S. Steel and Rockwell and Heinz, and he used to make very, very slick 30-second commercials, and he learned a discipline whereby you have to say something very, very quickly, concisely, and get the message across.
The Calgon story. What happens when a Calgon research team and their submarine are reduced to micro size and sent on a dangerous mission deep inside a washing machine?
Engines reversed full, Captain. We're stuck.
We've got to find out what's on those fibers.
Trapped in the fibers of a giant T-shirt, the Calgonauts discover secrets of gray, dull-looking laundry.
Well, it feels like...
Leftover detergent film. The fibers are covered with this stuff.
Oh, this box has never been opened.
Add the Calgon.
You'll thrill as Calgon dissolves the dirty leftover detergent film.
It's working. The gray is gone. The fibers are clean.
Let's get out of here.
I think I'm in love with you.
If you're tired of dull detergent films and grade B washes, thrill to The Calgon Story at your nearby family washing machine.
This has been transposed into his feature editing, so that there is very rarely a let-up in the action. I don't think there are very many shots that last 4 or 5 seconds on screen. There are not those long camera moves revolving around. All George would do would cut them up if Mike did them.
I shoot a lot, and because I know that I can make the decisions later on the cutting table. And so I wind up shooting a lot of material that I fall in love with and I really like, and there's just economically no room for it in the final piece. So it's harder, and it's very hard to be, when I sit down and I say, okay, now here are 10 scenes that I like, which 2 are the least needed. It's really, that's a very difficult process for me. And I think that's where all your bias comes in, and all your emotions. It's very difficult. It's a lot easier to edit when you're up front, when you're writing. You know, there's a lot of people that work with really a formula in terms of when to use the master, when to go in, and all that. And people will say that's very shattering if you don't follow some kind of a pattern, or if there isn't some kind of an expected cutting pace that people can relax and get comfortable with. I don't think that's true at all. I don't think people notice cuts. Or if they're well done, if they're not shattering or jarring, you don't notice them at all. And there's a sequence in Martin, for example, which could have been just a murder sequence, but it's elongated as far as I thought it could be elongated.
Emergency number, call 911.
I can't call 911, that's the police. I don't want
Not the
police.
police, it's just a general emergency number.
And that some of the actions are very mundane, dealing with the telephones.
Yeah.
Look, call the hospital, tell them what happened, all right? Tell them we're coming, we'll be there in 5 minutes.
But all of those actions, no matter how mundane, become interesting when you look at them in a certain way.
Mercy, is Mercy around here?
Mercy, okay, I don't know the number.
All information, get the number, call them.
They're all part of the overall action that's going on, and they all help to build a certain amount of suspense, because they're things that we deal with every day.
Shit, it's fucked up. Wait a minute. I gotta do it again. I can't get through. I forgot the number. Wait,
I don't like sloughing sequences off. You know, I don't like car chases that don't do anything.
Yeah.
You know, because within, you know, a fight in this room that encompasses like 3 punches being thrown. I'm not talking about a big brawl. I could, you know, you could do a 3-punch fight and make it last 5 minutes, you know. Because everything's valid and everything is information, and I like to deal with detail. and I'd like to just go with a visual, you know, almost a kind of a cubist look at that. And that's another place where I'll just shoot a lot of film. I use a lot of sound elements, and I cut rather than on a flatbed, on a table with a synchronizer. And there's a certain kind of tactile thing that I get into in terms of the tracks. It's a visual, almost checkerboarding of the tracks. And I don't use film as leader. I always use white because I like to see that white-brown juxtaposition of the tracks. And I like to lay the tracks across on a table, and you can almost visualize how the track is working. And I use a lot of track, and I cut, when I do my first cut, I don't just cut picture voice. I cut with some kind of music and with effects. And rather
so you
than,
use pre-recorded music, like, to get the inherent rhythms going?
Yeah, to get some kind of rhythm going, until I find a rhythm going. And then I wind up with a lot of tracks. I mean, for a small independent stuff, I mean, I've seen studio productions where they get into, you know, 30, 40 tracks, but that's just because they're too lazy to lay them in sometimes. But I use 12 to 15 tracks. And I like a lot of sound. I hate dead air. I'll always use some kind of an ambience and a lot of music, which is just all form stuff. Some people say that my tracks are too driving or too full, but that's just personal preference, you know.
In summary, this sequence from Dawn clearly demonstrates Romero's style. Conceptualized in the screenplay stage, given substance during shooting, and given shape in the editing.
Distribution arrangements till after we finish a picture, not wanting to have too many fingers in the pie too soon, not wanting to compromise from ground zero. Eventually we may have to make some compromises on a business level, but at least they start later. Right. And we finish the picture, so it's a matter of maybe taking something out.
This statement was made during production and carried with it an ominous note which reverberated for over a year as Romero fought for his version of the film, a strong vision that stood as a thorn in the side of negotiations with distributors, even after Dawn opened to tremendous business in Europe. Finally, a breakthrough was achieved.
We made a couple of errors in signing the distribution deal with Night of the Living Dead, in that we sold or we signed a distribution deal worldwide. We didn't hold out any rights, television, Canada, Europe, nothing, 16 millimeter, nothing. We gave the distributor the world. Basically, I didn't know anything then about the business side of things and about how to draw a contract. Now, knowing what I know now, you want to ask for as many of those controls as you can possibly get your hands on. If you have a smash hit film out in theaters, your 16 millimeter rights are going to be worth a lot. Your television rights are going to be worth a lot. Right. So, principally, I would say that. Hold out for as much as you can hold out for.
There were a number of people that offered us substantial amounts of money to deliver an R-rated film, which meant we anticipated cutting the guts out of the movie in order to get that R. We looked for a distributor who recognized, as we did, that the best economic course of action was to leave the film untampered, even though that created other problems. It created the potential problem of a newspaper not taking the ad. It created the problem of a TV station not running a commercial, a certain theater not playing the film. We believe that ultimately, economically, those problems would cost less and we would make more if the film was left as George wanted it.
Several of the distributors that wanted it badly, understanding the problems, for example, with the MPAA here in this country, that the MPAA would probably X the film, and the only way to get an R would be to cut it. So I wound up holding out during the negotiations, and luckily, Richard backed me up all the way on this, because there were a couple of times when it would have been easier to take a deal.
Mm-hmm.
Would have been financially easier to take a deal.
Right.
And that's the other thing. I think that Richard and I have had a good relationship that way. So, you know, I don't have to worry about my own internal team. That's big, number one. But having Richard's support, I was just able to sit there and say, look, I'm not going to cut the picture. When the distributor took his stance to put the picture out unrated, it's not that he wasn't accepting the restrictions of an X, because he's putting a flag on it that says that no one under 17 will be admitted. Forget with a parent, not at all. He's accepting those restrictions. What he's not accepting is the symbol itself, the X, because the X does automatically say to most people in America that this picture is obscene.
For a major company in the industry to release a film without a rating is a major break. And that was something that was long and hard in finding. We basically are in agreement with a system which flags movies and tells people what they're going to see. Our point is there should not be economic penalties attached to that.
But then I also had to fight, and you always have to fight for things like length. Usually with an exploitation picture, a distributor will say, it's terrific and I love it, but cut it to 90 minutes. Once again, there's no secret. I can't teach you how to get the kind of controls that enable you to leave your picture longer or to have that kind of creative cut. It's a matter of just holding out for it and not selling until somebody gives it to you. Right. And I was able to do that partially because of my reputation, but partially just because I sat there and said no.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of sticky times when people would get up from the negotiating table and walk and go home. And you got to sit through, and those are the toughest times. You got to just sit through that and say, okay, we'll see you tomorrow, hopefully. And we did see him tomorrow, and they ultimately said, okay, it can be your cut.
So Night of the Living Dead is the beginning, and this is the end.
This is the middle.
This is the middle of it.
Room for more? There's plenty of room for more. Okay. Zombies are still down.
So is this the end?
I don't know. The zombies are... Zombies are a little smarter, but I'm getting dumber by the day. Theoretically, we can. It's going to be pretty well hidden. We don't have to worry about being too much here.
Actually, it blends into them pretty good.
Great. So we can come right in.
The shirt is here.
We should be a little higher, you know, and maybe a little closer. Yeah. So we really see that it's him, and you know.
I brought some paper lab jackets to pass out. If you, it's definitely going to come that way and that way.
Go to a 40?
40 on that one.
Yeah.
40
George,
on this one.
You think about maybe getting lower and make it more of a profile for the...
No, I don't think it sells. It would sell as well. We can. First of all, we can't go too far, but we could.
Oh, I see. Because of what's over.
Because of what's there, but we could go here. We could go a little lower here. Like maybe we could shoot the second one from here.
That'd be great.
And that one would be a little wider.
Could be.
Hello. We need everything.
It's all here.
Yeah, we should.
You ready?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
what
we're bringing in now, yeah, that.
Definitely.
Let's get a nice close-up.
Nicotine substitute. 5 weeks. Not a superstitious guy at all.
A little fill, and we might do another. Let's go into the.
When did we shoot that? This spring?
Is Marty here yet?
No, it's not.
Or this fall?
Is that too tight? A little more room?
That's not the awesome.
They'll have to. Robbie has to go down there. Now he can.
Now you should be able to.
Watch me, man, sudden hat.
I didn't realize you were here.
Wait a second.
Oops.
God.
Jeez. She's a little bigger than I am.
Oh, this is made for you. Oh.
Can you do me a favor? Can you reach under there and pull my pant legs down? Otherwise...
Good move, Robbie. Nice line.
Wait a second. Okay, now the other one. A little to the left.
Okay, arms above.
Your arms are on top. Are you okay?
Yeah. Oh, guess what?
If it's uncomfortable,
You gotta wear a shirt.
We can...
Flashing.
how uncomfortable is it?
It's not, actually, it's not, it's really pretty bad. No.
What's bothering you?
A little, like, if I can have a little pad for my lower back.
Okay, now,
The pillow's on me now.
if we can get your back up.
In a good way or a bad way?
Now, put your head back. Let's try 2 pillows, see what happens. Okay?
Pillows look a little neat.
Can you slide up?
Eloise, where'd you put that strip of
I put it under him.
I mean, something like this.
Yeah, since this thing is almost touching him. Can you get up even higher?
They're going to think it's me, boys.
How you doing?
We don't have beat camera up yet, Zook, so I can't say for sure, but I think so.
You want some makeup in the slice first?
I will be.
Not a fun thing to do.
New appreciation for lingo, I guess.
More.
Where's it at?
Oh, too much.
I have
No,
it was a
not
little
enough.
over 1. It was 1 3/4.
Really?
Takes
Yeah,
a
just
little while
keep
for it
going.
to slow down.
More. More, Norm. Toward the feet, Marty.
Likely to get splashed here, some of you.
Right. As soon as Marty starts to put it up, then you start. You ready? Ready, Marty?
Okay,
All
here we
right,
go.
here we go. Quiet, everybody.
And you're going to clear that light right
B, roll. B, speed. Rolling. Thank you. Start it, Martin. Where are we?
Cut. Freeze.
Cut. Freeze. Rami, all right?
What is that on the side of the thing?
That on the side of the thing. Is that the applique?
Yeah. Okay, we need it again, I'm sorry to say. See that, Tom?
If anything, favorite on this side.
Should we, for a while, you think?
Walk around.
Wait, we can, I think it's possible to clean this up without
don't know if
moving
you can
anything, including Rami, unfortunately.
The flap somehow came up instead of going in.
That's Roy, this if we got to do it
No,
again.
yeah, let's go again.
Forensic pathology staff. So weird, because wasn't it glued all the way? I mean,
Did it a couple of times.
Yeah.
Trying to stay independent, you know, you can never, there is no easy street. It's always hard trying to get your project up, finding your money, and then hanging in there.
Yeah.
But he does it. I mean, that's what he wants.
No, it's getting really hard for independents. I mean, the market is getting smaller and smaller. And it's just like hamburger joints. I mean, there's no more mom and pop places around. And if you don't have, 2,000 prints out there on Friday the 13th, the date. I mean, you're just not going to get the kind of distribution. You know, you're just not. It's very hard to become a player.
You know, I'm in hell. I'm in living hell. My hell is, okay, you want to direct a film? Great. We'll get you very close, 8, 9, 10 times. At the last second, we'll pull it out from under you. You know, that's my punishment. In a previous life, I'm in hell. So I thoroughly believe that if it happens, I'm not in hell. You know, okay, so very, very close. Graveyard Shift was a prime example. Script by Stephen King, rewritten by Clive Barker, George Romero exec producing, me directing. What a great package. New World had that. For a year we went around. We were this close. We were signed. I still have a contract with them. Although they've gone to TV now, mainly their thing is that, fine, if you don't do a feature, we'll get you to direct for television, a TV movie or something. Fine, great, I don't care. But we were so close, and then they dropped it, saying that we don't feel that we can develop a story about rats. Well, it's not about rats. There are rats in it, but it's not a story about rats. I swear to God, 2 days later, I looked in the newspaper, and New World Pictures presents slugs. What's the difference?
George wants to have a family atmosphere on every one of his films, and that is what he wants. He can't stand tensions. This is for real, and he can't stand political problems, which is, I think, one of the main reasons he doesn't want to deal with Hollywood.
I'd love to make a big movie, you know. I mean, I'd love to make a Batman movie, you know, or something like that. But I probably don't want to make it under the kind of conditions that you're forced to make those kind of films under. And for the small independents, trying to get financing for little movies is getting harder too. I mean, the market for that is drying up. It used to be that you could find these, you know, there were little companies where you could go to get $1 million. And particularly if you have a track record, you know, guys like Sam Raimi or me, or, you know, people that have made, you know, a few movies, you know, not that it's ever, you know, I don't want to indicate that I think it's, you know, it's a natural human right that somebody should give you money to make a movie. But if you have a track record and you're not the kind of guy that's going to take the money and go buy a car with it, you ought to be able to get a fair deal if all you're trying to raise is $1 million or $2 million. Unfortunately, even the little companies, many of the little companies, you know, you can't generalize and say that it's everybody, but many of the little independents have the same attitudes that the majors have. They think that, you know, when they give you their $1 million, that they're buying you. Right. And, you know, you owe them your kid and your house and your movie. And you know, I just can't, it's really hard to get. They ought to just let you make the movie, even if it's a formula thing like Freddy 5 or whatever, you know. Obviously you have to work within the limits of whatever the franchise dictates, but you ought to be allowed to maybe throw in a couple of your own ideas here and there. It's pretty tough. It's a mean-spirited market that is mostly controlled by people still that have no affection or affinity for not only this genre but for movies in general. It's a way to make money, unfortunately.
Go ahead, yank harder. There you go, thanks. You're all copacetic, sir, except for lining up the drop.
A little more hair on it.
Marty, here we go. Roll camera A and B, please.
A is rolling.
B is speeding. Start the...
Ready? And cut it.
That's a cut.
Yeah.
Okay. Get our Royds and get him out. You okay, Ron?
Wait. Let's, George, is this enough schmack here?
I mean, I think it's... I don't think it's enough blood.
I can go again, no problem. Mike, be over there. Great, thank you.
We got plenty of film in there, right?
Whoa. Just trying.
Open me up, Bud. Or give me the flashlight on this.
a little, yeah, I'm gonna lay one on top of the other.
Okay.
Actually,
You killed my bogey!
George did write that role for me, and then there was a big, I really didn't think I was going to get to play it because, well, it was the first time George worked with other producers other than Laurel, and they had a lot of their own visions about casting, and you know, so I had to go through the auditions with a lot of people with a lot more experience than I had, and I was really afraid I'd lose it. And in the end, I got it, but I felt good about it because they wanted me also.
You don't like the beard? I'll tell you what, neither do I. It's out of here, okay? Beard is history. That deal? What?
When we needed the scenes where Ella was being affectionate with the character of Alan, we had to wait for days when the monkey was in heat, actually, make sure that Jason, the actor, was the first male that she saw that day, and for that day and for maybe 48 hours after that, she'd be hot for him. And I mean, she'd just get on him and climb on him and start pumping away, and you know, so that's how we got that stuff. And it's literally the only days we had, like 2 days during the course of the shoot when she went into heat, and we shot those scenes like those days.
Your actor sounds like a good sport.
Yeah, well, he was great with, I mean, thank God he wasn't afraid of them. They were pretty scary.
I'll take one after, maybe.
That looks pretty good.
All right, stand by. Quiet and start A and B, please. Roll cameras.
Speed on A.
Speed on B.
Yeah, B speed.
Norman. Cut it! Ronnie, you okay? All right, Roy it quickly, please.
Quick Roy.
Quick Roy's, please.
That's the one.
Yeah.
I hear whoever he's with.
Tommy, please, Emily.
That dude's brilliant.
Not so much better.
Oh, it was that barbecued ham last night.
Barbecued nuts in there.
That Swiss steak is too much.
George has this sort of bawdy approach to horror, which is great. It's raucous and loosened me up. I mean, I thought, well, hey, you know, kind of unbuttoned my vest for me and just let me, let her rip. Kind of thing. Very helpful. George was very, very helpful to me. He understood thoroughly that horror and humor are the identical thing. They're just, it's just the only difference between horror and humor is that you're looking at this grotesque event in a certain way. I think the essential thing an artist does is to bust the confines of the previous assumptions that he finds. And if he's successful, he succeeds in changing the world.
For me, it's a dream come true. I've done film adaptations with comics before, but if there was one film I wanted to do, it was this one. With the comic, I mean, it's a gamble, I suppose, but the images are so embedded in the national consciousness that we've chosen to just run images on the cover. There will be no title. And we're trying to call the 4 images out of the film that anybody who's seen the film at any time would just recognize it. That's Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, it's an instantly recognizable thing now, especially the original Night. Images from that are like King Kong on top of the Empire State Building. And for such a low budget, initially fairly ignored movie.
In Spain, when Night of the Living Dead opened there, it altered the whole direction of the film capital. Before that, you had those Paul Naschy, creaky regurgitations of the Universal films, where he'd play his Wolfman character, and he did a Mummy, and he did a Frankenstein. And after Night of the Living Dead, you had stuff like The Blind Dead, where they took the Knights Templar and translated it into, you know, a Romero-esque atmosphere. Or in Italy, where you have, you know, Lucio Fulci just pouring out these incredibly graphically violent films. So it was really international.
It seems like the Living Dead series has been around long enough to have a cultural impact.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so.
The Stereo Warehouse on the Gulf Freeway presents Night of the Living Deal.
The big deals, they keep coming and coming. Jetson car speakers from $9.
Here's a real hot deal.
12-inch 3-way home speakers, hundreds of watts, $49.
Final call on clearing car stereos, $19.
Save up to 80% on brand name stereo.
Night of the Living Deal.
At the Stereo Warehouse. Any other deal is no big deal.
Is that a cultural impact? That's, you know, I've seen a lot lately. There's been a lot of little cartoons and things like that. So I mean, it is creeping into the title. I think probably more than the film, and even the image, even the imagery.
Right.
Probably has, you know, people know the title even if they haven't seen the movie.
I'd like to say, George, I'm talking right to you now. I've enjoyed your movies, loved them through the years, and they've been a great help to me. And George, there's been we know each other, we're friends, and I've never asked you this before, but I really want to play a zombie in your next movie, George. I know it's a lot to ask, but I'd be a good zombie, George. I really would. I'd work hard. I'd shuffle. I'd bleed. Whatever you want me to do. That's all. I just wanted to say that.
Here we go. Stand by.
Ready, John?
Quiet, please. Ready? Heat them up, Ringo.
Watch your eyes. Ready?
Roll camera. Speeding. Action. Pretty good. Pretty good. Cut it.
Got some spread that time.
George.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Oh, you cutting out?
Yeah.
All right, man. Thanks.
I'll see you again in 10 years.
Fine, another 10, we'll keep walking.
Yeah.
Keep walking and talking.
Got some spread that time.
George.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Oh, you cutting out?
Yeah.
All right, man. Thanks.
I'll see you again in 10 years.
Fine, another 10, we'll keep walking.
Yeah.